Hi everyone, I'm Lyle Goldstein. I'm director of the China Initiative. I want to welcome you all here and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us at China Chat. I think a lot of you have been here before, so you know we're really informal, and feel free to get up and get more food. If you gotta go, that's fine. No problem, pull in some chairs, and we like to keep it informal here. Often we'll chat about current events, but today we're going to spend our full hour discussing this critical topic. At the China Initiative, we've made a point to focus on some of China's key bilateral relationships. You may recall, actually, you can find on YouTube, you can find a series of discussions that we had about China-Japan relations last year. And today we want to put our focus squarely on the China-South Korea relationship, which I think we can all agree is vital for the future of East Asia and also the future of the world. These are two economic powerhouses, so I expect we'll talk quite a bit about the trading relationship, but let's also not neglect the security and geopolitical aspect. I don't have to tell you that there's some remarkable events occurring where we have North Koreans showing up on a Ukrainian battlefield. Is something almost unprecedented in history. So I think our guest is open to discussing a lot of these things. I will say, just so you know, this is being recorded. The lecture is being recorded, but the Q&A is not going to be recorded. Sorry, folks. So I think we all understand why we might want to do that. So now let me take a moment and introduce our guest. I was so fortunate to have dinner with Dr. Seong-Hyon Lee last night, met for the first time. Very excited about that. And after dinner, I will tell you quickly, we strolled over to the Korean War Memorial in the center of Providence. And if you haven't seen that, please take the time and go see it. And as I told Dr. Lee, there's a reason that it's in the very center of our city, because this community, like many others, were profoundly impacted by that war, and we remember it very deeply. Anyway, now Dr. Lee received his Ph.D. from Tsinghua University. Many of you may know that's in Beijing, maybe China's most prestigious university. He's senior fellow at the George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S. China Relations. Previously, he was director of the Center for Chinese Studies at the Sejong Institute in Seoul, South Korea, which probably many of you have visited there. It's a very famous institute there. His research focuses on contemporary relations between China and South Korea, and now he's serving as a visiting scholar at the Harvard Fairbank Center, so just up the street. Anyway, welcome, Dr. Lee.
Interesting. Okay, I was there.
Okay.
But thank you. Moment of truth, why you are here today, for my talk or for lunch? The answer is so obvious that I don't have to speak about it. But anyway, it's good to have both lunch and some talk about the Korean Peninsula, particularly the geopolitics about the China-South Korea relations. And first, I want to thank Dr. Goldstein and the Washington Institute at Brown University for inviting me here today. And it's a privilege to share my thoughts with all of you as a distinguished audience. The election of President Yoon Suk-yeol 2 years ago marked an important moment in Korean politics. Yoon Suk-yeol is the South Korean president's name. Shortly after his victory, Chinese leader Xi Jinping sent a congratulatory message. And he said, the opening sentence of Xi Jinping's congratulatory message to President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol 2 years ago starts like this. 中韩两个国家是半不走的友好的精灵。China and South Korea are friendly neighbors that cannot be moved away. This phrase, often employed by Chinese leaders, emphasizes the geographic inevitability, also historical connection between the two Asian neighbors. Yet, a South Korean scholar referencing the same phrase by Xi Jinping, he commented, if possible, we actually want to move away from China. This poignant remark captures the complex and often strained nature of Seoul-Beijing relations. The scholar's comment was made at a conference in 2022 hosted by Korean National Diplomatic Academy, where he just visited a few weeks ago. The occasion was to commemorate the 30th diplomatic anniversary of relations between South Korea and China. So how ironic that is to make such a remark that we want to move away from China at the 30th birthday party. Around the same time, a news article marking the occasion for the headline, Distant Neighbors, Yonhap News Agency, August 24, 2022. The title of the news article commemorating China-South Korea diplomatic relations, Distant Neighbors. It kind of tells a lot, everything, symbolizes. Together, these statements reflect the broader sentiment in South Korea toward its large and powerful neighbor, one of unease, frustration, and growing disillusionment. Now, our task here today, besides eating lunch, is to understand why that is the case. How this sentiment has developed over the last 3 decades. And we must revisit the initial motivations that led South Korea to establish diplomatic ties with China in 1992. At that time, South Korea had 2 major hopes in establishing diplomatic relations with China. First, it sought to leverage China's influence over North Korea. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union just 1 year before, Seoul believed that forming official diplomatic relations with China, a close ally of Beijing, could help contain North Korea's military adventurism. There was also optimism that China could play a constructive role in the eventual peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula under South Korean leadership, not under North Korean leadership. Second, China's vast untapped market was seen as a tremendous economic opportunity. South Korea, just like all the rest of the world, captivated by the idea of accessing 1.4 billion potential consumers. So the popular saying at the time of the era in South Korea summed up this excitement. If you sell chopsticks in China, you can still become very rich. That was the going saying in South Korea. For China, on Chinese side, normalizing relations with South Korea offered significant strategic and also economic benefits as well. Establishing ties with a key U.S. ally in Northeast Asia allowed Beijing to weaken American influence in the region while expanding its own influence. Additionally, China demanded South Korea cut off diplomatic relations with Taiwan as a precondition for establishing ties, further isolating Taipei on the global stage. So in 1992, the day when Taiwanese flag was lowered in the center of Seoul, about 3,000 Taiwanese expatriates and students, they gathered together and they cried. It became a very famous emotional picture. And that's why some of Taiwanese friends still remember and cannot forgive South Korea for betraying Taiwan. Economically, South Korea's rapid industrialization, about a couple of decades ahead of China, provided China with a model for economic development, one that was geographically accessible and free from Western ideological baggage. Cultural, historical similarities between the two nations, Confucianism, initially perceived as an asset, fostering optimism that these shared traits, similar cultural commonality, could serve as a shock absorber in times of conflict, because we have a similar culture, similar characters when it comes to using the traditional Chinese characters. However, over time, these similarities have often become sources of contention rather than cohesion. How ironic that is. Over the past 30 years, both nations have achieved remarkable progress. China, as you know, has emerged as the world's second largest economy, challenging United States globally. And Xi Jinping famously stated, 东升西降, the East is rising and the West is declining. In China's political lexicon, when the Chinese state media, political leadership mentions the East, it's a euphemism for China. And when they mention about the West, it's a euphemism, particularly for United States. So China is rising and United States is declining, according to Xi Jinping. South Korea, meanwhile, has become the world's 10th largest economy and a major military power. And some of South Korea's weaponry are being used in Ukraine battlefield today. However, the growing asymmetry in their economic and political power dynamics has strained their relationship over time. China no longer treats South Korea with the same level of respect it did 3 decades ago, a shift that has been deeply frustrating for South Korea. One instance that encapsulates this dynamic occurred in 2017, when Xi Jinping hosted a meeting with then South Korean President Moon Jae-in's special envoy, Lee Hae-chan. This seating arrangement for the meeting placed Lee in a lower-tier position, despite the fact that he's a presidential envoy and the former prime minister of South Korea, violating usual diplomatic protocol. And many South Korean citizens focused on this picture for many, many days. And South Korean media reported, and many commentaries were ran for days and days. Many academic articles actually written in Korean. Some of them have been translated in English as well. The seating arrangement for the meeting placed Lee in a lower tier position and violating usual diplomatic protocol. And many South Koreans interpret this as a deliberate snub and a reflection of China's imperial nostalgia. Oh, it used to be like this 500 years ago. Oh, it used to be like this 1,000 years ago. We are the big brother Korea used to be the younger brother. We are at the top, we are at the lower tier. So going back to these memories of historical nostalgia, this is at least how many South Koreans felt that way by looking at this symbolism of the seating arrangement. Public and media backlash in South Korea was swift. Yet the Moon Jae-in administration at the time refrained from lodging an official complaint, which also drew criticism for its perceived passivity. I use the terminology respect. Respect is a crucial concept in Asian cultural discourse, and its absence has become a recurring theme in Seoul-Beijing relations. During the presidential campaign, Yoon Suk-yeol prioritized this terminology as the number one principle in bilateral relations with China, putting it over the so-called mutual interest. So he listed a few things as a principle of Korea-China relations, but he put respect, mutual respect at the top of the principle, while mutual economic interest was a lower tier. So that shows how much this is such a sensitive, cultural, important issue to Koreans at least. The issue became particularly pronounced during the controversy surrounding the deployment of the U.S. terminal. I have to read this because it's very complex. Okay. Get set, ready, go. Okay. U.S. terminal high altitude area defense system in South Korea. It's a very advanced missile battery system called THAAD. Thank you. Developed by the United States Army, but deployed in South Korea at the request of the U.S. government to protect South Korea against threat coming from North Korea. However, it has a very powerful radar that could monitor military movement of China's military, Blue Navy and aircraft carrier, also ICBM arsenal in China's northeastern region near the Dongbae region near the China-North Korea border. They have these ICBM silos over there in case they need to hit the continental United States. The distance is the shortest distance that China can hit the continental United States should be located at the up north, so that they could fly over the North Pole, near the North Pole, so they hit the United States in a very short distance. And if this deployment of that has this missile battery system also has a very powerful radar system, and China was very sensitive about this radar system because China's all military movement can be seen by U.S. military assets. So China retaliated against South Korea, not against the United States. And China's retaliatory measures, including economic sanctions and restrictions on Korean cultural exports, profoundly damaged bilateral relations and fueled anti-China sentiment in South Korea. This rising anti-China sentiment is one of the most striking developments in South Korea's public opinion over the past decade. Traditionally, if you are familiar with Asian geopolitics, Japan was the country that elicited the greatest antipathy among South Koreans. Why? Because of the painful legacy of Japanese colonial rule. However, recent surveys show that anti-Chinese sentiment has now surpassed the anti-Japanese sentiment for the first time. According to a 2021 poll conducted by East Asian Institute, 73% of South Korean, 73% of South Korean held negative views about China, and compared to only 10.7% positive views. So that means that only 1% out of 10 South Koreans had a positive views about China. Similarly, a Pew Research Center survey in 2022, 2 years ago, found that 80% of South Koreans viewed China unfavorably, marking a steady increase in negative sentiment over the preceding years. I know there are some Chinese students and Chinese colleagues here. I'm just a messenger. Don't hate the messenger. It's an academic conference. I have all the footnotes and citations. It's not my personal views. It's data. So as a person, we're doing a social science, right? So I can show all the footnotes and references. Don't shoot the messenger. Can I go back home safely?
Absolutely.
It was such a significant change that New York Times even carried a very prominent title on this event. South Koreans now dislike China more than they dislike Japan. And they put that as a title of a New York Times article. Because they do, wow, what's happening in Asia? These Koreans, now they hate China more than they hate Japanese. What's happening here? So there is some very significant things happening here. What accounts for this dramatic shift? Several factors stand out. First, China's perceived overreach and authoritarian tendencies have alarmed South Koreans. Beijing's harsh retaliation of THAAD deployment that I just showed the picture, and its crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. Chinese friends don't know this very much, but when there was a pro-democracy protest in Hong Kong in 2019, South Koreans paid very keen attention to it. Why? Because something similar happened in South Korea 40 years ago. 1980, there was a pro-democracy uprising in southern city of Gwangju. And military rule at the time, South Korea was under military authoritarian dictatorship. And they brutally cracked down the pro-democracy protesters, killing many people. So if you have the historical memory and see what's happening in Hong Kong, you kind of have relevance to you in terms of psychology. Additionally, China's handling of COVID pandemic, marked by censorship and initial denial of the outbreak and draconian quarantine measures, has further eroded public trust in South Korea. Besides, cultural and historical disputes have also played a significant role. Controversy surrounding the origin of kimchi, hanbok, Korea's ancient kingdoms have fueled resentment in South Korea. For instance, in 2022, the National Museum of China excluded ancient Korean kingdoms of Goguryeo and Balhae from its exhibition in East Asian history. So from Chinese history, those ancient Korean kingdoms no longer exist because they see that as part of China. Because they expanded their territory, and now currently, it has become part of Chinese territory. And China's standard is that as of 2024, anything belongs to Chinese territory, its history also belongs to Chinese history. So they excluded in the past when there were two ancient kingdoms by Koreans. This incident, which coincided again with the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations, was seen in South Korea as a deliberate act of historical erasure. In October 2020, BTS, the South Korean boy band, who I'm very familiar with. I know all of them. We are very close each other. The only problem in my relationship with them is that they don't know me at all. Other than that, our relationship is so good. So BTS, 2020, received the Van Fleet Award in New York for their contributions to strengthening South Korea-US relations. And during their acceptance speech, RM, the person at the center, the group's leader, referenced the so-called sacrifices and our two nations shared together. So he mentioned sacrifices our two nations shared together. Here, the two nations means Korea and the United States during the Korean War. Unexpectedly, this remark sparked criticism from Chinese netizens, as China had also supported during the Korean War North Korea, the other side of the war. And there are many Chinese soldiers also, sacrificed. And why you only mention Americans and South Koreans? That's not fair. The Global Times reported backlash, accusing the speech of BTS playing up to US audiences. The Chinese netizens' protest and uproar was so ferocious enough that Korean companies like Samsung and Hyundai Motor Company, they removed the BTS-related content from their Chinese platforms in response to the Chinese backlash. The dead incident remains one of the most contentious issues in the bilateral relationship. So in South Korea, among the experts and scholars, we commonly say that in South Korea-China relationship, there are only two periods. Before the that, after the that. Before the that, everything was good, going up, economic, cooperation. But after the that, we're beginning to discover all the negative aspects of China, including all these things that I mentioned. So going up and going down, and this is the very moment that I'm speaking to you, this is like a downhill moment. Again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just describing the situation. China's economic retaliation, which targeted South Korean businesses and cultural export, had a profound impact on public opinion, yet China has consistently denied any government involvement in these measures, attributing them to the spontaneous patriotism of the Chinese people. This denial has only deepened South Korean frustrations, as it leaves no clear avenue for resolution or accountability. The broader implications of these tensions extend beyond bilateral ties. They highlight a critical question. How should South Korea navigate its relationship with China in the face of growing economic interdependence, rising nationalism across the globe, many countries, including South Korea as well, not just in China, and shifting geopolitical dynamics that Lyle mentioned about Ukraine and U.S. China rivalry, Israel, Hamas conflict, South China Sea, Taiwan. While South Korea's business community continues to view China as an indispensable market, younger generations, particularly millennials, like many of you sitting here, including me, millennials and Generation Z, 20 years ago, increasingly advocate for disengagement from China. For instance, in 2021, South Korea's youngest ever political leader, 36-year-old Lee Jun-seok, unfortunately, he graduated from Harvard. He took the helm of the largest opposition party at the time, and Lee vowed to push back against what he termed Chinese cruelty. And he mentioned this in public in his interview with Bloomberg. It's on the website. I just checked 1 hour ago. You can still check it. It's there. particularly in places like Hong Kong. Actually, Lee, 2019 Hong Kong protest, Lee actually flew to Hong Kong to witness, personally witness what's happening. And he came back and did this interview. As the leader of the opposition People Power Party, he tapped into the strong anti-China sentiment among South Korea's youth. Much more than 80% of those aged 18 to 29 years old in South Korea held unfavorable views of China, or stark contrast to some older generations. So this has a very significant implication because the younger generation in South Korea, the more anti-China sentiment they have. What that means that just like Lee Jun-seok, in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, these people will become the mainstream political leaders in South Korea. And imagine what kind of relations that South Korea and China will have when they have this kind of a sentiment growing up and experience this. So that's why I, during some of my discussion with Chinese side, that this is very significant development that you should watch out. Looking ahead, mitigating tensions will require careful diplomacy, a sustained dialogue, and historical cultural disputes are unlikely to be fully resolved, as they have deeply tied to questions of national identity and sovereignty. As we reflect on the 30 years of Seoul-Beijing relations, it is clear that the initial optimism of 1992 has given way to a far more complex and ambivalent reality that I just described. And this journey offers valuable lessons about the challenges and opportunities of managing relations between a rising power, rising superpower, and a middle power like South Korea in an era of shifting global dynamics. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Lee. That was really terrific. I think we all have learned a lot there. I'll say goodbye to our remote listeners, and we can begin another session here where we can very candidly address some of these issues in the question and answer. So I would invite you to think of a question. If you can, maybe try to make it a little bit succinct so we can get around to lots of questions. If you've got to take off, that's totally fine. Maybe I'll start off with the most obvious question. I don't think you mentioned, if I recall, I don't think you mentioned Donald Trump. He's on a lot of our minds these days.
Who is he?
Could he be in the back of the picture with a boy band or something? Probably not. Of course, that's intertwined with China-South Korean relations. I know there are so many layers to this. It's hard to focus just on one part of it. But could you give some hint of your thinking about what the return of Trump might mean for South Korea's outlook and even its relations with China?
So this is off the record, right?
Off the record.
Can I trust you?
You can trust me.
Can I trust Watson?
Yes.
So, South Korea definitely, between Kamala, just like Trump, he cannot pronounce Kamala's name. Kamala. South Korea preferred Kamala Harris over Trump because this South Korean administration of Yoon Suk-yeol government has invested so much political arsenal, ammunition in improving relations with Washington. Also improved relations with Japan. I mentioned that many South Korean constituency, because of historical baggage, they have some reservations about improving relations with Japan. But Yoon Suk-yeol did that. And Yoon Suk-yeol also strengthened particularly the trilateral security cooperation among United States, Japan, and South Korea, which China sees as the fundamental security tool for U.S. to contain China in Asia. And Yoon Suk-yeol did all these things. And that, despite the Chinese demand to withdraw that is still there as well. So there are many reasons that, why Yoon Suk-yeol government is very apprehensive of the imminent second coming of Jesus, or not Jesus, second coming of, I read the Bible before I came here, it's like second coming of Jesus Christ. Maybe today we are living in this, latter day of humanity, second coming of Trump, that Trump will kind of disintegrate the alliance system. And, Trump also, threatened that we're going to withdraw, U.S. troop presence in South Korea. Trump also said that South Korea, you should pay about 9 to 10 times of what you pay for to have deployment of U.S. troops in South Korea as well. And Trump is also interested in his exchange of love affairs with Kim Jong-un, that he might be tempted to sit down with Kim Jong-un again. In that case, North Korea already has nuclear weapons, and sitting down with the nuclear North Korea will definitely demand that I'm not going to give up nuclear weapons, but we can still meet. In that case, the nature of the negotiations changes from denuclearization to non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And this is something that totally 180 degrees opposite policy of current Biden administration. So South Korean government is in a hot spot right now. And in 2 years, there will be another presidential election. So there are some ominous signs coming on the world right now.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, well, the floor is open. I know we've got a lot of wisdom around the table here, so let's, and many questions, I think, to bring up. So, Professor Rode.
Okay, thank you very much. And the idea of history wars have been around for a long time. So this is a look at how these wars are being played out right at the moment. And I've had a chance to visit in the last month 4 different Chinese museums, both very local museums and then larger museums in Shanghai, that all commemorate aspects of 19th and 20th century history. And it seems to me that all of them have an initial slide and a final slide, or an initial display and a final display, that are part of a story, part of a narrative that's being crafted in a very systematic way. And so I don't know what museum it was. I'd be curious about.
In Beijing.
In Beijing.
Museum of History in Beijing.
Okay,
National Museum of History.
Yes, okay. So that's a very central museum there. So I guess and the role of museums, and I understand at one point there was an interest in having scholars come together to try to address problems of Chinese history vis-a-vis Korean history, to try to come up with a syllabus that both sides could read and take something from. That I don't think has gone very far. But I don't know if you have any thoughts about any way out of this this box, and whether or not that the versions of history in South Korea are changing right now, that there's a shift in tenor between Japan and Korea right now.
Well, this is a very difficult question to answer.
It is.
Because it deals with the history, and history means that it's identity. And identity shapes your nationality and the sense of patriotism, which is very increasingly important in all over the world. And how we could get out of this box, as Grant, as he mentioned, that in 2004, actually there are 3 countries: Japan, South Korea, China. The scholars get together to come up with a common textbook of history. There were some efforts, and it didn't go very far because the Senkaku Diaoido Island dispute in 2010 and 2012 happened, and then Xi Jinping took power and become very strongman style. And even there are also South Korea, China, and Japan. We have a trilateral, official trilateral partnership organization. It has an office in Seoul. That when you go to office, that there is a Chinese flag, a South Korean flag, and Japanese flag, side by side together to cooperate, including this kind of historical disputes. That we need to cooperate. We always the people envied in Asia that look at Europe, the European community, 27 countries under one flag, European flag, and how could we not have just only 3 countries? Come on, 27 countries can do it. Why can't we do it? East Asian community, we always thought about it. Even 100 years ago, there was a South Korean patriot called An Jung-geun in the Chinese city of Harbin, 1910. He assassinated Japanese Prime Minister Ito Hirofumi, and he was executed by the Japanese. But while he was in prison, waiting for his execution, he wrote a monograph, East Asian Peace. How can he become one community? So I think that there was a dilemma that people were thinking about it 100 years ago, and the same dilemma still here. And probably Watson should invite me so that I could delve into this topic and publish the article and get Nobel Peace Prize for this topic. Thank you so much for the suggestion.
I like this idea very much. Okay. Yeah.
Really excellent talk. Fantastic background, and your sense of humor is fantastic. So I had a question about North Korean troops, and particularly now in Ukraine. So does this agreement, which I think was partly facilitated by President Xi, do you think that will in fact embolden North Korea, or that's the first part of the question, possibly resulting in more transgressions in the South? And from a military point of view, I'm just curious about how you see the quality of troops that haven't been in active duty, combat for quite a while. Yeah, thank you.
There are about 10,000 to 12,000 North Korean soldiers. They call it, it's a special forces, thunderstorm, unit. They call it 폭풍 군단. But when North Koreans, you're right, they don't have that combat experience for decades. So when North Koreans call that as a special forces unit, whether that meets the American standards of special forces quality, I think is questionable. But nonetheless, we also not clear whether all of them are special forces, combat forces, or some of them are logistic soldiers. That's not clear. And the intelligence apparatus, they are trying to identify who are these people, including the age of the soldiers. So they are still working on it. Whether this emboldens North Korea, definitely. North Korea had quite a high expectations regarding China for Xi Jinping June 2019. Xi Jinping visited Pyongyang. I'll help resolve 2 things: your economic concerns and your security concerns. So both economy and security, Xi Jinping telling Kim Jong-un, I'll help you to resolve this issue. But pandemic set in, COVID-19, and the exchange is shut down, and North Korea is waiting. But then there is Russia-Ukraine war happened, and Putin is very friendly to North Korea. So if this girlfriend is not very friendly, I'll go for the second girlfriend. So North Korea has 2 options right now rather than 1 option. So this is a very, North Korea particularly likes this Cold War dynamics because during the Cold War, both China, Russia competed against each other to move North Korea. So Kim Jong-un has this historical memory that, this is such a nice period to be in. While we all hate this period in history, Kim Jong-un, their perspective is completely different.
So by the way, just a point of order, I don't think there's, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's been any evidence that she facilitated that. Not that I've seen, but we can trade on that.
My impression was that all the, transfers going around between Putin and Xi and...
Yeah, I don't think, again, if somebody speak up if they have the citation there, but I'm pretty sure that mostly...
I could be totally wrong about that since President Trump was elected. I haven't read any news.
Okay, very good.
He knows it. He knows the answer, but it's a top security clearance. He cannot share it.
Well, that's a good segue. Professor Kozarev from Endicott College is visiting us here.
Thank you very much. It's a big pleasure. It's also not the first time I had a privilege to learn more about here Dr. Lee's presentation and discussions. Very, I would say, impressive knowledge and also from different perspectives. So let me just take one Russian narrative, which is like Russia is looking at, like Russia and China, by the way, looking at South Korea, saying that we can understand why, for example, such countries like Bulgaria, Romania, or even Finland, like leaning toward the United States, given the fact that, for example, I just checked, Finland GDP is less than 300 billion. South Korea's GDP is 1.7 trillion. Why is South Korea has decided to actually kind of abandon the previously beneficial relationship within East Asian, especially with China and Russia, and put itself into a very kind of nuanced position, especially given the U.S. plans in East Asia, Indo-Pacific, and Southeast Asia, and East Asia. And also, I witnessed an interview last year. There was a huge delegation from South Korea visiting Harvard, and they interviewed Bob Ross about U.S. China relations. And I sensed there were some people, some scholars who were strategists. Probably they were advising the president. So I sensed that there was a huge, big concern in Korea, South Korea, of not being involved into U.S.-China war, especially around Taiwan. So, what are the benefits for South Korea, except for the selling of cars, chorus, and selling cars, exports of cars? Everybody drives Kia and Hyundai now in America. What are the real benefits for South Korea in terms of in the long run, of devoting itself, being so devoted to the U.S., its relationship and alliance, and strengthened alliance with the U.S.? And the related question is...
Well, hold on.
No.
We want to give other people a
So,
chance.
to what extent actually, because South Korea seems to be ready to give the United States the rights to use including the nuclear weapons, potentially against its adversaries, without South Korea probably having a say how these weapons are being used, how they are being managed and deployed. So that's the question. So that's a question not from Russia, China, but it's kind of like objective questions, including for those who in South Korea who are concerned about South Korea over dependency on the United States.
You sound exactly the South Koreans who are critical of Yoon Sung-yeol. Why are you doing all this? What are the benefits? Why are you departing from balanced strategy, neutral strategy? Now, full-blown pro-American strategy. Why you bandwagon for pro-American policy? What are the benefits? The debates are ongoing. And but initially, the reason that Yoon got elected was, again, history matters. Frustration with the previous South Korean president, Moon Jae-in, who was seen as very, very much pro-China. Despite the fact that being pro-China, China did not help resolve North Korean nuclear issue. China retaliated against South Korea in terms of economy. So now their pendulum is swinging back, and then anti-China sentiment rising, and then this candidate, Yoon Sung-yeol, showed up, so he got elected just like Trump. In a way, it was like opportune time. You are here at the right time, right place. And now people initially supported, and now people are also, doing all this math. Exactly what you're mentioning. What are the dividends that by fully investing in the American basket, what are the things that you're gonna get when it comes to nuclear security, when it comes to North Korea? Why you bother to have a difficulty, bad relation with Russia, which is so many people see that unnecessarily, both sides. That I think it'll take time, and the debate will continue. And I have some more answers, but given the time constraint, we can talk about it later after this.
Speaking of dividends, I must say, it's not just Kia cars. It's South Korea is selling a huge amount of weapons now around the world, but to Eastern Europe in particular. But let's get some more questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Lee. So I have a question related to nationalism and sports. So I think, especially during major sports tournaments around the world, such as Winter and Summer Olympics, Asia Games, Asian Cups, and recently esports as well, there has been huge disputes within the netizen communities in both China and South Korea But I saw there's the positive communication with the rise of esports like League of Legends, and how does it serve as facilitating communication with those two nations, given that there has been already anti each other's sentiments within the netizens community.
I think you are onto something because this is very new information.
Yeah.
What's happening is that, as you mentioned, what's his name? Trump, right? Yeah. Someone sounded like Trump. Just got elected. I think in this country, right? And everyone is recalculating their calculus that this person will weaken the alliance system, and we cannot stick to the previous game plan. We need a plan B, right? And that's why Xi Jinping recently improved relations with Japan, India, now South Korea. They, for the first time in 30 years, now South Koreans visit China without visa. It happened for the first time. So Xi Jinping sees a window of opportunity that, before United States will destroy China, Trump will destroy United States first. Trump will disintegrate alliance system first. This is an opportunity. Now, let's improve our relations with America's traditional ally countries to set the tone. So esports come here. South Korea, Samsung, SK Hynix, they, semiconductors. Who is the largest market? China. 41% of semiconductors South Korea produce go to mainland China. 21% goes to Hong Kong, but this 21% also, many of them goes to mainland China. This is a huge semiconductor appetite. South Korea makes a lot of money. Samsung takes 20% of South Korea's national GDP. Can you imagine that? A country, in a country, just like TSMC, one conglomerate takes 20% of national GDP, and the 41% of semiconductors, that is main products, goes to sales to China. But Washington tells South Korea, don't sell semiconductor to China. And South Korea, many people, just like what you mentioned, what are you getting back? Why are you investing? Why are you listening to Washington? What's the dividend? So China is sensing opportunity. So China is, in a way, signaling to South Korea, hey, now you can visit China without visa, and let's find areas of cooperation that is not sensitive, that is not semiconductor. We are not going to demand you to sell semiconductors, chips anymore, but let's find the areas that, to reduce anti-China sentiment in South Korea. Let's find the areas of commonality. That's where cultural products of exchange is coming from. And that one of the things is both South Korea and Chinese, we are crazy about esports. So let's begin our kind of exchanges, cooperations in this area that, Washington will not be too sensitive about it. So esports, cultural exchange, academic exchange, tourism is beginning right now again. It's going to go. This is the game plan that China is unfolding.
All right, very interesting. All right, I think we have about 5 minutes left, maybe a little bit more. Why don't we kind of hit a bunch of questions, and then we'll hear some final thoughts from Dr. Lee. But go ahead, yes.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, during the really hard to make the relationship to Japan and USA, which is quite controversial in Korea as well. Using unpopular president here Korean policy. But the impression that you get is to China there is not really a strategy without except for exploiting the anti-China sentiment to get votes from the younger male voters. And in the diplomacy, there has to be a plan B or plan C, even if you hate China. So what do you think is Yoon government's strategy A, plan B? Because you didn't mention what the strategy from the South Korean side to China is. Probably because there is none, but what would you do?
I think.
Hold on one second. Let's go and see if there are any other final questions. Yeah.
Thank you for your message. It seems to me that you're explaining less the declines in China-South Korea relations and more
the worsening of South Korean perceptions of China? And the answer is Chinese conduct. So to get social sciencey and also to paraphrase Kennan, what are the sources of Chinese conduct? And is it because nationalism? Is it because of miscalculation? Or is it because China doesn't care about what South Korea thinks? So, yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
interesting. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've read that as a result of like the China's ban of Korean cultural exports, there are actually people in China who are upset about that because they're like fans of K-dramas and stuff. So you've spoken a lot about how Koreans see China. What about the other way around? Is it feeling mutual?
Okay, and maybe I'll add one final question as the, I study military issues, and I'm quite concerned about, I think South Korea has built a naval base, correct, on Jeju Island, a big naval base, and there's been some hint that this would be used in a Taiwan scenario, and I just wonder what do you rate the probability of of South Korean intervention in a U.S. China conflict over Taiwan? Sorry to be again, I'm asking all these dark questions, but.
So each question deserves like a 1 hour seminar, but I'll tackle it in just 30 minutes altogether.
Yeah, anybody who has to take off, that's fine.
Again, history matters. What are the strategies that it seems like you said? China doesn't seem to have a strategy to how to deal with South Korea when there is an anti-China sentiment is rising, and also South Korea doesn't seem to have a strategy to China mutually. And also, someone asked that, why South Koreans are unhappy and about China, and the feelings are mutual. When you get married, at some point, there is a doldrum period that, at least when you have enthusiasm, you fight, you quarrel, but when you are fed up with each other, they don't talk to each other. So this happened around that period, that many of the negotiations, including me participating in some of discussions, when your national security issues concerned, the Chinese position stays the same, South Korean position stays the same. When we meet each other, we repeat the same narrative. And then there's no room for exchanges because, can you sell chips, Samsung chips to South Korea? No, that's the bottom line that we cannot sell to you because America telling us not to. So what can we bargain each other? So these repetitive cycles of negotiation and communications kind of bog down. There are miscommunications. So South Koreans are fed up with the Chinese, and Chinese are also fed up. Actually, you're right. Chinese are also quite fed up with, and so much so that during the previous Moon Jae-in administration, President Moon, the pro-Chinese government in South Korea, President Moon repeated Xi Jinping multiple times to visit South Korea. During 5-year term of Moon Jae-in pro-China government in South Korea, during that period, South Korean president invited Xi Jinping multiple times. Xi Jinping never set a foot on South Korea during the 5-year period. So what that means is that when the communication and when the feelings are defrayed and there is a really lack of motivation to talk to each other. That's why it seems like there is no strategy on both sides. China doesn't have a strategy how to deal with South Korea. South Korea doesn't have a strategy how to deal with China because it's also faded by the bigger geopolitical happenings, U.S. China rivalry. That's partially answer your questions. And to skip some of the discussions that I partially mentioned, Jeju Island, if I may, I think you are overstating the importance of the naval base in Jeju Island. Of course, it was started during the the Jeju Island base, naval base in South Korea, which is very close, geographically close to China. When did it start? During the Nomuyon administration, 2005, 2006, 2007. During Nomuyon was seen as a pro-China government in South Korea. But during that time, South Korea was building naval base close to China. So Chinese people, Chinese scholars really got curious. What the hell are you doing by building naval base right across my nose? Are you thinking about
Close to Taiwan.
something about me? But to get straight to the point, I think the strategic thinking in South Korea for having naval base has not evolved into the Taiwan yet. Taiwan is not on the picture yet. Probably later in period, but they, at least my best appreciation is that having the naval base in Jeju Island has a theoretical potential to be deployed and used by U.S. military as well in terms of their Taiwan crisis. But from South Korea's strategy perspective, I don't hear any discussions that this could be this purpose of this is for Taiwan contingency.
Okay, folks. Well, I want to thank you for joining us, and let's thank our speaker, Dr. Lee. Great. We are off next week, but since I see a lot of people are interested in this subject of China and South Korea, or China and Korea, we have another speaker actually lined up for December 2nd. Professor Terence Rurig, who many of you know from Naval War College. He is a amazing Korea expert, and I believe he'll be speaking mostly about North Korea on that occasion. So December 2nd. Please join us for that, and have a great day, everyone.